Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Dennae Hanford. This is the Flashback Friday show, where we recap the high-level lessons learned from the Tough Decisions guests from the current week. And now, your hosts, Dan and Dennae.
Today on the podcast, we are going to be going over the interviews that we had this week on our podcast. So first one is going to be episode 39. Episode 39 is with Paul Carney. Episode 40 is with Mark Kenney. Episode 41 is with Jason Greenwood. And then episode 42 is with Omar Khan. So Dennae, do you want to go ahead and start us off and give us a few of the highlights that you remember from Paul Carney's episode?
Yeah, so we enjoyed talking to Paul Carney a lot. He was kind of a different story than some of the others that we've heard as a former math teacher and then someone who went into developing new ideas and new products and, of course, working for himself now. He had a really interesting background, interesting story, and he's been very successful with the new ideas that he's had.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest thing with him is that he stepped out from, doing, working for somebody else and kind of doing his own thing. And did you mention something in there about his HR background, about how he's doing a lot of, technology and trying to building some apps and things like that for the HR business to make them kind of think more like business people instead of just like the HR teams?
Right. And he had, the math background and the technology and the ability to kind of see the future, if you will, as to what some of the needs were. And that's something that he mentioned when we were talking to him is that, as entrepreneurs, and specifically the type of entrepreneur that's developing new ideas and new products, he said you can't be looking down. You have to be looking around and you have to be looking ahead as to what the needs are and what they're going to be if you want to stay ahead of the game.
Well, and I think the other lesson that we kind of gathered from his episode that I remember is, he talked about how sometimes in technology, especially in the technology space, you have to sometimes ask yourself before you create that particular product or app, is there an audience for that particular, app? Because sometimes in technology, we get this idea, we go ahead and create the app and then figure out, is there a market for it or is there an audience? And sometimes it's too early in time to be able to know whether or not that's going to actually work, or sometimes there's just not enough gumption behind it is what he says. And you have to learn to be able to drop that and go on to the next thing instead of creating that an emotional attachment to that tough decision of letting that baby go, if you will, for your business.
No matter how good of an idea you think it is, if there's no demand for it, it might not be a good idea, regardless of, how innovative or how new and advanced it might be. So then on Tuesday, we talked to Mark Kenney, and he is a real estate investor in the Atlanta area, correct?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's very big in the multifamily, syndication space. He does a lot of teaching in that space, has over, 20 years in the property valuation and acquisition operations, area within real estate. And he has, a lot of background in some things and investing in over 1,200 units in apartment complexes. So, very astute when it comes to the multifamily. And for those of you who don't know what multifamily is, when we say that, multifamily is apartments, so apartment complexes. He basically is invested in over 1,200 apartment units and has a very high, top-notch reputation in the community and tries to provide exceptional value to his investors. He actually is from Michigan and is one of 7 kids. He's also an accountant, a certified public accountant. And so he has, a very good finance background, what makes him so good at underwriting and going through some of the due diligence and some of these properties. But I think, one of the key things, from his is that sometimes, you just have to, make sure that you trust yourself and try to trust that what you're doing is going to be successful. And I think sometimes we sometimes forget that and sell ourselves short a little bit and not trusting ourselves and moving forward with that. And so I know he had a deal that he invested in Atlanta that he talks about and kind of dives into during his episode, which, I would encourage you to go back and listen to if you're interested in real estate at all, or you're in the multifamily space. Go back and listen to his episode because he actually dives in pretty deep into, some of the details and nuances around that kind of a bad decision that he made and jumping in with that particular partner. And I think, to this point right now, I think he might still be dealing with that. So some good lessons to learn through that episode. So, be sure to, go back and check that out, and it'll help change your mindset on a few things.
And then on Wednesday, we talked to Jason Greenwood. He's currently working in the e-commerce space in New Zealand. And his story was, I really, really enjoyed hearing him tell about his business that he owned and grew and then sold. He talked a little bit about how the decision to sell went for him and his partner, and, even maybe that they should have sold as much as a year or two ahead of when they actually did. But, they were still able to get out and be successful and make some money off the sell. And then also about his journey back into the workplace as, what we would call a W-2 employee. It was kind of interesting to hear that. And we'd not had anybody who'd been in business for themselves and then gone back into employment for someone else. We haven't interviewed anybody else like that. So it was interesting to hear him talk about that as well.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the thing that I really stuck out to me from his episode was what you just said is, how he kind of talked about how when he was in that business, he said that he probably should have exited it a lot sooner. And if he would have exited it sooner, he would have been able to sell it and make a little more money off of it. And by the time that business had run its course, he was only able to sell it to one of his competitors or another distributor or something like that for basically the price of the cost of the goods that he had left in the business, but had a good run of it. I think he was into it for like 7 years, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But just several different factors, kind of came about at the same time to make it where it just really wasn't a viable business model anymore. But, them having to get out and sell it to a competitor and then go move on to something else. I appreciated his honesty about, trying to find a job that you can be passionate about after you've been working for yourself, because at least in my mind, it would be a lot easier to be passionate about something that you're doing that is for your own improvement and profit and that kind of thing. You find something that you enjoy and then you really go all out in it. But he's found a good place there where he can have an ownership mentality while still working for someone else.
That particular episode kind of coincides with some of the lessons learned in episode 39 when we were talking with Paul Carney. We had just talked about, how, sometimes we hold on to things a little bit too long because we consider them our babies. So definitely take some time to listen to both of those episodes, episode 39 and 41, to kind of learn some of those tough decisions that we talked about through both of those interviews. They're very, very good and very, very solid, and I encourage you to do that. The next one is going to be Omar Khan.
Right. So on Thursday, we interviewed Omar, and he was amazing to talk to because you could just hear him figuring out numbers and analysis in his head. He's really, a genius at that. And that's his specialty, underwriting these large deals. He's got a lot of background in that. And so it was really fascinating to talk to him because you could just hear his expertise on that side of the business.
Yes, and he is very, very knowledgeable when it comes to underwriting real estate deals, specifically, multifamily or those apartment deals. He has a lot of experience in that capital financing area and investments. He's a CFA charter holder, so very, very knowledgeable. And he comes from mergers and acquisitions in the oil and gas industry, and has valued over $3.7 billion in capital financing, and analyzed all those deals over the last 10 years of his investing experience. And now he's taken all those skills and those experiences and bringing them into these multi-million-dollar real estate apartment complex deals, and helps to advise some of these high net worth individuals and entrepreneurs in these real estate portfolio allocations. Definitely, when he starts to talk, you sometimes know that you think he's talking over your head.
He was way over my head.
Yeah. And he is. He's on a different level than a lot of people. And I think that's one of the reasons that makes him so good at what he does, is that people trust what he knows and what his experience is.
One thing I did appreciate about him is he kind of has a sense that not everyone has access to his kind of expertise all the time. And yet we still want to be smart and wise about investments. So he and his team are actually developing an app for multifamily syndicators to help them with their underwriting, which I thought was a fabulous idea, because then, the average person like me can do a little bit better job understanding the numbers.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that even the investors, like you said, from an uneducated standpoint, can look at this app or the software that he's developed and help break down some of those numbers a little bit easier and give it a little bit more standardization in the industry for underwriting a deal. Because syndicator A can underwrite a deal and it look totally different than syndicator B, who underwrites the exact same deal. Mm-hmm. It's just about how you modify and change some of those numbers. And I'm sure there's going to be some flexibility in that software or that app that's not fully completed yet. They're still in the process of completing it, I think. But yes, you can, obviously, reach out to him and contact him through that. And again, his big takeaway that I got from his episode was his approach to facing some of these tough decisions, and not just in real estate or multifamily syndications, but just in business in general, to invert the equation, invert the just tough decision, and make sure that those problems are always inverted so that you can sometimes play the devil's advocate. And I will tell you that after interviewing Omar, he is very good about playing the devil's advocate.
Well, I was just going to go in the same direction with that, because you sometimes talk to people and you get the feeling that, they don't want to hear anyone who disagrees with them. And I understand to a certain extent, surrounding yourself with people who are positive and who, have confidence in you. And that's all good and well. But I think we have to be willing to look at it from a different side. And one of the things he said was he actually looks for people who disagree with him. And he wants to hear what their arguments are. And it does one of two things. It either causes you to really stop and examine the direction that you're going. And maybe you are going the right direction, but by listening to those disagreements, you can really examine that and make sure, or perhaps it causes you to rethink and go, maybe they do have a point. Maybe this is not, as valid as I thought, or maybe this is not as good a decision as I thought. Either way, you come out ahead for having at least listened to the arguments from the other side, or the inversion as you stated it. So I really appreciated about him that he wasn't afraid to hear people who disagreed with him, because he felt like it would make him better.
So let's just recap one more time. We have Paul Carney. He is on episode 39. Then we have Mark Kenney on episode 40. Then we have Jason Greenwood on episode 41. And then episode 42 with Omar Khan. So please take some time, go back, listen to those episodes. A lot of good information, a lot of good insights, and what I like to call golden nuggets that you can pull from those episodes. So be sure to check out those episodes. And again, please go to our website, toughdecisions.net. You go to that website, there is a place there for you to sign up for our free weekly entrepreneur email. So please do that. Put your email in there. Every week, we'll send you some updates on the various quotes that we have from our episodes that a lot of people like, which are those entrepreneur quotes. And then we'll also give you links to the show notes and the various episodes and some of the recaps and things like that. And we're also, on some of our newer episodes, we're talking about what we call the trifecta, which is going to be some questions about the favorites in business as it relates to these various people we're interviewing. And so one of the things we talked about is some quotes, some favorite quotes of these entrepreneurs, but also, as we have been, we ask about their favorite book. And then also a new question in there is about their most favorite technology that they use in business. And so we're going to aggregate all of those responses and include those in some of our weekly emails for our entrepreneurs. So be sure to check out our website, toughdecisions.net, and enter your email while you're checking out the show notes for this podcast, as well as any other podcast that you're listening to. Thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, have a great day.
Make sure to subscribe to our Tough Decisions podcast channel to listen in on Saturday and Sunday for our 2 specialty shows to help you make better decisions. The Step Up Your Game with Dan show will air on Saturdays, followed by the Survive and Thrive with Dennae show on Sundays. Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us spread the word about the Tough Decisions podcast with your friends. And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, Facebook, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to the Tough Decisions Show.